So I think I was comfortable kind of having almost like two lives. I feel like it's quite common with a lot of Asian Americans. It's like at school, you're not as Asian, but then when you're home or at Chinese school, that's when you can be Asian.
Lots of people use different methods to explore their heritage and identity. This Taiwanese American explores it through colors and lines.
My name is Felicia Liang. I'm a Taiwanese American illustrator and artist based in the Bay Area. I actually didn't grow up doing art. I worked in consulting and product management, but I felt like art was always something I enjoyed doing. And my first kind of big project was about exploring my Asian American identity through artwork. I kind of wanted to go a little bit inwards, and so I wanted to explore who I was as an Asian, and art was a great way to process a lot of kind of complicated feelings around that kind of stuff. So I started drawing for myself. That's the first time I started using Instagram and social media to share my artwork. What was amazing was a lot of people resonated with it. I found new friends, even like old friends from like high school, college I hadn't talked to, reached out to me saying that they really related to it. So I think being able to share my artwork and build a community that way has been really, really remarkable. I grew up not facing any kind of overt racist comments or any feelings. If anything, it might have been more just me internalizing because I was like, I do look different here, but I was never treated worse or made fun of for that. At school, you're not as Asian, but then when you're home or at Chinese school, that's when you can be Asian. I think as an adult now, I'm fine being both at the same time, or if I need to switch, but I'm just comfortable being me. I know some parents, they would just openly share, but my parents didn't. But when I asked them questions though, they would share about what it was like living here as kids, how competitive it was. My dad served in the military when the KMT was in power, so that was a whole aspect of his life I didn't know about. And then he talked a lot about my grandparents and their family and their upbringing, and again with the KMT and how that kind of upended everything in our families. And coming back here, I'll start asking my grandparents more about just childhood and stuff too. They both, my grandpa passed earlier this year, and my grandma has a bit of Alzheimer's, so it's just making sure to just ask stories about their childhood and what they remember.
After the interview, we decided to walk around Felicia's grandma's childhood home. What side did Taiwan fight on during World War II? Yeah. And most people would actually reply Allied. And I was like, no, actually Taiwan's part of the Axis.
This is so interesting you're showing me this. I think a couple of days ago I was talking to my grandma. I think it was around this time. She was at school in Hsinchu, that sometimes American would have bomber planes, but I think they would just drop it. I think they knew there was a school there, but I think they would just drop it just kind of as a warning. So she relived kind of this moment where there was these air raids, and her school parts of her school, her neighborhood were bombed. So it's interesting that we're seeing this right now.
And I guess as children of immigrants, I'm just always I hear bits and pieces of stories from people from different generations. I try to piece together as much of it as I can, but it's kind of cool. It's even though these are all disparate stories, it's still my family, it's still my story, and I kind of fill in the gaps kind of myself. We would just go to different restaurants. I'll just take photos of things, whether the food I eat, the neighborhood walks I go on, and then spare time at night, I would just kind of think through, this is what I did during the day, and I'll just kind of plop it on the sketchbook. There's not really a set way of doing it. It's just kind of based on oh, I want to talk about all the coffee shops I've been to. So I'll just kind of do it that way. I guess the architecture and the greenery here, I don't know. I'm a very visually stimulated person. And I feel being a kid, I was always aware of it, but maybe as an adult, I have a newfound awareness and appreciation of things. I think just walking around here has been just fascinating, especially seeing the different architecture with the concrete buildings, the old buildings, the Japanese houses, that's all integrated, and all the huge trees and stuff everywhere. I think that's been really fascinating to me.
I would just go on walks with him and we just look at the architecture and just stare at it. I don't know, it's so unique looking. But I don't know if it's just so different than what we have, but it's it's like kind of brutalist with the concrete, but then you see all these like different colored tiles, different shapes, different textures on them. Like all the wire, I don't know, it's like the wire work around the windows have like patterns to them. And then all these like sills have like tons of plants. So I feel like it's just like a sensory overload. I don't know, how do local Taiwanese people feel about the architecture?
A lot of people think Taiwan's one of the ugliest.
Ugliest?
Yeah, so
That's
it's
so
a
funny. I
different
don't know, it's a different perspective in America. I'm like, it's so cool and unique.
Just hearing more stories from other people who live here and their perspectives, I would just love to learn more about that. I feel like that's just kind of a way for me to kind of stay plugged in with this part of me. I have a hard time still forming like what that means to me. So just being able to meet other folks on how they kind of define themselves, I think would kind of also help me kind of solidify how I identify as Taiwanese American.